Hi, everyone. This is Caroline Griffin with Riot. I would like to thank everyone for joining us today. I know we'll have a few people join a couple minutes late, but we'll go ahead and get started in the interest of time. I'm very excited to introduce John Sotomayor. He's been a long-time supporter of Riot and engaged with us in many ways, including our accelerator program. So very thankful to have him here today with us. With just a couple quick reminders. This event will be recorded, and please save all of your questions for the Q&A box, which I will be monitoring, and we will take all of the questions at the end. Without further ado, I will let John take it away. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Caroline. It's great to be with you all again today. We really have enjoyed supporting Riot and all of the things that Riot does for the entrepreneurial and emerging growth company community. You all do great work, and we're pleased to be part of it. I just wanted to briefly introduce myself. I'm a patent attorney. I have a degree in electrical engineering, so I spent several years as a software developer, worked at the patent office as an examiner, spent some time as in-house counsel for a couple of small companies before they were acquired, and then started our own practice called Soto IP Consulting in 2011. Or 2014, sorry. So we are very much interested in providing information about, first of all, strategically what intellectual property can do for you, why it's valuable. And second of all, give you a little bit more information about demystifying the whole process of the patent preparation and prosecution process. So I'm going to start off talking a little bit about strategically what is intellectual property. And why is it important? Well, intellectual property has four major branches, and that's patents, trademarks, copyrights, and trade secrets. I think everybody is kind of familiar with what patents do, but patents basically, talk about this more in detail further when we get in the second half of the presentation. The patents cover a machine, a manufactured item, a device, or a composition of matter, or a process, or an improvement to any of those. Trademarks, on the other hand, are very, very different in the fact that they will cover a single source identifier for a good or a service. So trademarks really belong with branding and company identification. Copyrights, on the other hand, cover original works of authorship that are embodied in tangible mediums of expression, such as books, movies, web pages, anything that you've captured in some sort of tangible medium of expression, whether it's physical or virtual. Trade secrets are very similar to patents, with one major exception, in that the strength of a trade secret is in its secrecy. And many things that you can have protected under trade secret, you can't patent, because they may be things that, if the secret were known, were commonly reproducible, such that they don't meet the burden of rising to a patentable invention. But trade secrets really depend upon three basic things, and that's care, custody, and control. That's making sure that you have the trade secret in your possession, that you have a very limited access, I mean, maybe 3 or 4 people at the most. And each time access to the trade secret is granted, it is logged such that individuals, and at what time. And then also that this is not available for public view at any time. So care, custody, and control is very important in trade secrets. The interesting thing about trade secrets is that they never run out as long as you can keep the secret. And the biggest example of this, of course, is the Coca-Cola recipe for their syrup. They've had it for over 100 years, and at any one time, it's my understanding that no more than 3 people have access to this closely guarded secret. So they've maintained trade secret status for this syrup innovation for quite a long time. So given the fact that there are very different types of intellectual property, what can these protectable intellectual property categories do for you? Well, in any growing company, you're always going to be concerned, of course, about protecting your intellectual property. So that's really the first aspect. And everybody understands that protecting your intellectual property is important. For example, for patents, a patent gives you the right to keep others from making, using, selling, or importing your patented invention. It doesn't necessarily grant you the right to go ahead and practice the invention, but that's okay. As long as you keep others out of the marketplace, you have the marketplace to yourself for a limited time. So that can be very, very important in terms of making sure that you've got greater runway for yourself in the marketplace. So that provides a great value to starting companies and giving them an open runway so that they can get greater value for the firm itself. And that's the second point.
Hey,
the second, sure.
This is Carolyn. Sorry, I just want to let you know that we're still just seeing your title slide, so we're not.
Yeah, I haven't moved on yet.
Okay, great. I just want to make sure. Thank you.
Sure, I'll change the title slide as soon as we get into the demystifying portion, because the first part of the talk is really just to provide strategically what you should be thinking about in terms of how intellectual property in its various forms can provide value for your company. So that was what I was saying. The second step is in terms of valuation. If you protect your intellectual property, it provides your company with more value because you can keep other people out of the marketplace. You can practice your innovation in an unimpeded way. So protection is important. Evaluation is important too. When I was in-house counsel for a small company in Durham, when it was acquired by TiVo in 2011, the intellectual property patent portfolio that we had managed to build had improved the valuation so much that the value of the company was double what it would have been without the patent portfolio. And this can be the same with a brand for trademarks or with copyrightable products such as movies and things like this. So valuation, of course, is a very important reason for protecting your intellectual property. But the third aspect that people don't think about also is monetization of your intellectual property. For instance, patents are treated just like any other piece of property. You can buy it, you can sell it, you can provide license for others to practice it. In every case, the protection of the patent permits derive revenue from your patented invention. So, and this can be the same for trademarks and although it's more difficult to do with trademarks because really trademarks are supposed to be a single source identifier. So they really are associated with a single company. But copyrightable innovations can be licensed, things like this. So the third part of strategic considerations of why it's valuable is the monetization aspect. So it really is important whenever you're thinking about your intellectual property strategy is to think about ways in which various types of intellectual property can work together. For instance, a patent and a copyright on a piece of software is a natural combination because you're protecting not only the function and structure of your software, but you're also protecting the actual implementation of how you actually coded it and your source code and any binaries that you might have. So as you can see, as you move forward, you want to think about strategically what ways in which I can pair or combine different areas of intellectual property so as to derive the greatest value. So that's really the strategic portion that I wanted to talk about to start this off. But the thing that we noticed when we first started working with small companies is that we got a lot of questions that were always associated with 6 major ideas or 6 major functions. First of all, how do I know if something? The next area in which we got a lot of questions was, okay, if it's patentable, how do I know if I have something that's patentable? We'll talk a little bit more about the strategy in terms of how you can move forward with patenting something. Negotiation. Patents come in 2 phases. Its first phase is application, and second phase is prosecution, where you put your application in front of an examiner in order for them to certify and allow whether the innovation is patentable or not. What about international patent protection? There is a venue for that. And what does it mean to have a successful result? So in this particular area of education, that means to us, how do I know if I have something patentable or not? Well, as I said earlier, It's patentable if it's a process, a machine, a manufactured item, composition, matter, or improvement. We'll also talk a little bit about patent hurdles that you need to get over. What does it mean to do public disclosure? What about software patents? We've had a lot of experience with that, and we can help give you some guidelines. What types of patents are available? And searches, what is that all about, and how is that important to you? So like I said before, it's patentable if it's any one of these categories. And one of the biggest categories that we deal with is in terms of process. And process covers some type of process that has a functional nature. Machine things that do something, such as a sanding machine. A manufactured item would be like a toy or a ball or something like that, something new. Golf balls are always really big at the patent office. There's probably 100 different types of golf ball patents out there. A composition matter, a new plastic, pharmaceuticals, any composition matter that you might create also comes under patentable status, or an improvement to any of these categories. So that's basically what you need to look at to say, okay, basically, is it patentable? Well, only if it's in one of these categories. But even patentability has some things that you need to be concerned about. And I talk about these in terms of patent, also what types of things you have to be concerned about in terms of moving forward with preparing and filing a patent application. So patent hurdles are those things that would bar you from getting a patent. The first one is if it's been previously patented, and that means anywhere in the world. And that's something that people don't realize is even though patents are geographically oriented, if you're going to get through prosecution, you cannot have your innovation patented anywhere else in the world because a US patent examiner cannot grant the limited time monopoly something that's already in public use. That also goes for having it been previously disclosed by another. And we'll get into that more when we're talking about public disclosure. But if it's been previously disclosed by another, that will also bar you from successfully getting a patent because, once again, the information is publicly available. And patents depend upon confidentiality. The American Invents Act, which actually went into full force and effect in 2013, changed the way in which we do innovation and in which we do patent prosecution in the United States. We used to be the only jurisdiction that said if you were the first to invent, then you could file for a patent application. Well, that's changed now, again, as of 2013, to tie everything around public disclosure. And if you are the first to publicly disclose something, then that starts a time clock. And that time clock is 12 months in which to provide you the opportunity to file and or to draft and file a patent application. So what does public disclosure mean? Well, if it's been offered for sale, if it's in public use, if it's been previously disclosed by the inventor, such as in a brochure or in some sort of survey document, or if it's been published in a general circulation magazine, or if you've given a talk on it like this talk today, and you've talked about the details of your innovation, that's considered public disclosure by the Patent Office. So if you have publicly disclosed something, you've started this 12-month time clock. So what about the type? Normally, when people talk about a patent, they're talking about which comes in two flavors, the provisional and the non-provisional. But there are also design patents. Design patents have a shorter life. The fact that they're only their time of enforcement is only 14 years, as opposed to 20 years for a utility patent. And there are also plant patents, which are extremely specialized. The design patents really look and design of a particular item. So if you change any element of that design in any substantive way, you get past a design patent. So if you have a design that is exactly what you want and you want to be known for that, then a design patent is a good choice for you. But if you're going to be doing something that has any sort of function or structure, changes or does something, then you're going to want to be filing a utility patent application. Patent application is a 12-month priority placeholder. Let's say that you have something that you've created, but you haven't figured out yet exactly all of the details on how you're going to do it, but you still want some protection. So you can file a provisional patent application that discloses what your innovation is, and have that hold your place in line, so to speak, in terms of the priority date of innovation for 12 months while you figure things out, patent pending status. You can go to market, you can go, or you can sell the item, you can do all of these things under patent pending status. But at the end of 12 months, you must convert that provisional application into a non-provisional patent application in order to retain the protection rights. A non-provisional patent application, non-provisional utility patent application, is the one that can mature into a full patent. A non-provisional patent application has a set of claims, which provisionals do not, which provides an examiner with an idea of exactly what it is your innovation does or how it is structured. And so when you're moving forward with thinking about filing a patent application, if you're ready to go, then you want to move forward with a non-provisional utility app. But also, we talked a little bit earlier, said something about software patents. Software is patentable. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people ask me, hey, I heard software's not patentable. Is that true? No, software is patentable as a process. But there are a couple of things that you got to know. The first thing is that it takes a long time for a patent to get through the entire examination process. As a former patent examiner, I can tell you that the average when I was at the patent office was 2 to 3 years for a software patent. It's gotten longer and shorter over the years since then, but we're still approximately in the 2 to 3 year range. So if you have an innovation, let's say a web application that is novel, but it's going to reach its entire market potential in 2 to 3 years, or it's got a very, very small market potential, even though it might be patent eligible, it's what we call a short life cycle innovation. And it's not a good choice for a patent because you will get your patent, but at about the time when you've reached the limit on the market. And so it probably won't do you much good in the marketplace. So if you have a short life cycle innovation or short life cycle patent, it's probably smarter to just market it and sell it. And then the other category is what we call a bet the business or a piece of software that improves the performance of a device. These definitely you should patent and move forward with the patent pending protection while it's in the prosecution cycle. We've had software patents granted as late as 5 years after the date of filing. In fact, I'm talking to an innovator this week. His patent was granted 5 years after he filed for it, but he's going to be able to go into market now with a very, very strong position because there are 2 or 3 companies that he can now sit down and talk with because they've been infringing on his patented invention. So if you've got something that you're going to build your business on or it improves the performance of the device, that's something you should definitely patent. Searches will provide you with the ability to understand what is out there that you need to be concerned about. If you do a patentability search, I recommend it highly, especially if you have, like most startups and emerging companies, you're very, very conscious of the amount of money that you spend. You want to make sure that you're going to be able to be at least successful in getting it through the patent process. And that's what a patentability search does for you. A competitive landscape search looks at what everybody else in your area of competition it has patented or filed on protection for, so that you can avoid filing for patents in those areas in which they already have staked a claim. The thing that we need to know about searches is that every patent application is held confidential for up to 18 months from the date of filing by the patent office. So there's an 18-month opaque window in which you can't see what has been filed. So be affected sometimes by the fact that there's something that got filed 6 months ago that you won't know about for a year. But there are ways of mitigating that risk, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But searches are very important to not only provide you the ability to know whether you should move forward with something or not, because there's nothing out there barring you, and also to see what your competitors are doing. And I spoke a little bit earlier about, the 2 to 3 year window, but the timing expectations from official filing date can be anywhere from 12 months for a simple device to 3 or 4 years for a complex software innovation. So you need to be prepared for that when you move forward with filing a patent application or determining whether you want to. So that's more all about whether something is patentable or not. So how do you figure out whether your innovation is patentable or not? Well, I devised a way of trying to assess that when I was working as in-house counsel, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But also you want to look at a patentability opinion that's associated with your patentability search to see what's out there. Your identification talks about what areas in which you can move forward with your innovation, and then and only then, if you've done this type of research, should you prepare and file a patent application. So at its very core, is it patentable? Must answer these 3 questions. Is it useful? Is it novel? Is it non-obvious? It's pretty easy to figure out if something's useful or not. I mean, you obviously wouldn't have invented something if you could go out and buy it. It's also, for the same reason, pretty easy to figure out if it's novel. Because if you had to create something because there's no way you could find it in order to move your business forward, chances are really, really good it's novel. The issue comes when you're trying to figure out if something's non-obvious, because an examiner looks at prior art references from all over the world. And what they're attempting to do is guard against infringement of things that they grant as patents. So if somebody has gone out and taken a piece from one patent and a second piece from a second patent and something else from a third patent and jammed them all together, that really is not an innovation, because innovations cover ideation and creation of a new process, machine, or object or composition of matter. So if you have several pieces that you can pull together from different references and it meets all of the limitations of the innovation you've created, then you're not going to be able to get it past a patent examiner because they'll say that what you've done would have been obvious to somebody of ordinary skill in the art. But that's where the rub really comes in. Because again, when I was in-house counsel, in my first 6 months, I didn't have very many of my scientists and engineers coming and talking to me about patentable items. So I asked them why. They said, well, what we're doing is obvious. I said, okay, here's the thing. You're an expert in what you do. The standard is whether it would have been obvious to a person of ordinary skill in the art. But if you're an expert, what's obvious to you should be something that has advanced the art. So I would tell them, if you or somebody on your team reviews a new process or item you've created and you just sit there and think, wow, it's just cool, you probably have something that should be investigated for patentability. And we built a patent portfolio from 8 to 23 patents over a 4-year span of time using this particular methodology. So if you're doing something that you do day in and day out and you find an improvement that hadn't occurred to you before but does something that's totally new, chances are really, really good you're going to get past the non-obvious test. So how do you make sure that what you have created isn't out there and something that you don't have to worry about? Well, that's where patentability search comes in more detail. You are permitted by the patent office to do patentability search yourself. But I guarantee you won't find more than about 70 to 80% of the prior art that's out there. Mostly because a patent examiner is going to search all over the world, and the patent office has the best search tool that I've ever seen. So they're probably going to find things that you wouldn't, that would be of real concern to you. So doing it yourself, you can do it, but you're probably not going to find many of the pieces of prior art that an examiner will assert. You can hire a search professional to do this. I happen to know LegalZoom does a really good job with doing a patent search, and they'll provide you with a lot of references. But the thing that they won't do for you is tell you what those references mean to you specifically. So that's where an intellectual property attorney comes in, or patent agent. They can do a search for you, and we will search, personally, because I was an examiner, I'm going to search the same way that an examiner does. I'm going to look worldwide. I'm going to do citation searches, catalog searches. I'm going to do context-sensitive searches. and I'm going to find everything out there that is not in the opaque period that is of interest to you or of concern to you. And an intellectual property attorney will attach with the search a patentability opinion that tells you how yours is novel or distinct over what has gone before. In the patentability opinion, patent attorney or patent agent will analyze the claims and the disclosure and all of the prior art that has been discovered to show you what the distinctions are so that you can identify your risk and opportunity for moving forward with drafting and filing a patent application. Risks are those things that might bar you. Opportunities are those areas that nobody has filed any patents on or protected in any way, so that you might be able to actually identify opportunities that you hadn't known about before that are natural extensions of your innovation. And once you've done that, then you can prepare and file a patent application that is a lot stronger and a lot more detailed toward protecting what it is you want to protect. So that's talking about the discovery process. So strategically, what do you need to be doing? Well, if you want to build a patent portfolio, and many times we talk with companies that have multiple innovations that they can capture. So in terms of building a patent portfolio, you want to do a little bit more intensive search. You want to do a little bit more intensive analysis. And based upon that, you can strategize on how to interlink your patents for the greatest scope of protection. And then and only then should you prepare and file patent applications. And a competitive landscape search not only looks at what you're doing and your competitors, but it looks at what everybody in your industry is doing. And it's done through a context-sensitive type of search so that you can identify those areas in which it may be in a different industry altogether. Somebody in a different industry may have created something that's would bar you or would give you an idea of additional opportunities. So a competitive landscape search helps search in a much broader, more detailed fashion across the entire landscape. Based upon that, a patent attorney will analyze all of the prior art against declined ideas for risks and opportunities. Again, risks are things that you can move forward with, that will bar you, and opportunities are things that you can move forward with, things that aren't out there in the industry as a whole. So that provides you with the greatest ability to develop a patent strategy to minimize those risks. Don't file on something that's already out there. That's just a waste of time and money for you. But it also maximizes your opportunities in terms of it might provide you with things that you hadn't thought about. Again, that would be natural extensions of your innovation. Based upon that, you can prepare and file patent applications to build out an entire portfolio, not just a single patent. Because I will tell you, in fact, if you look at any sort of patent litigation, you'll see that most patent assertions are for multiple patents against an infringer or a set of infringers. And that's simply because if you file a patent that has several innovations in it, and you claim all of them, and you would have a family of patents that all work together to provide you with a broader scope in terms of protection, so that you can actually get more value out of any judgment you might receive. And also it provides you to have a broader scope in terms of your assertions of infringement. So building a patent portfolio is a way to provide you with much greater scope and protection when you're asserting your patents out in the marketplace. And the thing that I wanted to bring forward about this is that when I speak with litigators, I don't personally go to the courtroom, but when I speak with litigators, they always tell me, when you talk with clients, make sure that they think 12 to 18 months out from their current technology. Because by the time you get into the point where you're going to go to the courtroom, and I will tell you, statistically, 92% of all patent litigation efforts settle before they ever get to a court. But for those 8% that actually do go on to court, you need to be thinking 12 to 18 months out from current technology, because that's where you're going to be when you get to any sort of assertion in a court of law. And I got to tell you, I've never met an inventor who didn't know what they were going to do in phase two of their innovation. So it's very, very straightforward to wrap that information into any sort of patent application that you're drafting so as to protect yourself against future harm. So that's strategy. Negotiation really is all about what happens after you file your patent application. Because remember, I said earlier that a patent application actually has two stages. The first one is preparation and filing, and the second stage is prosecution. And the prosecution is the approval process of sending it to an examiner, having them review it for novelty and non-obviousness over what they can find out in the marketplace, and then sending you back any information that they found. So when you file your patent application, it has a set of claims. Those claims have a particular scope. As an inventor, you really, really want broad scope so as to maximize your position in the marketplace. An examiner, because he has to deal with guarding against infringement, it's very, very narrow scope in your claims because he knows that a narrow scope claim will, in all likelihood, not infringe on anything that's already publicly available. So this sets up a natural stage for negotiation. So you would send in, as the inventor, a set of broad scope claims. The examiner is going to go out and find things that would be infringed upon by those broad claims and send you back an office action that has rejections and objections to your claims. And you can say, Mr. Examiner, maybe these references do show that, but I have another part of my innovation that I wish to include here. So you will basically narrow your scope a little bit, send it back to them. They'll broaden their scope a little bit in terms of search, and such that eventually you'll meet in the middle where your claims are broad enough so that they can't find it anywhere, narrow enough that the examiner can guarantee that it's allowable. And really, that's why I say this is a process of negotiation going back and forth. And I would tell you, and this is the Patent Office's statistics, the average number of these going back and forth, these office actions and responses, the average number is 3 before you get to patentability. So you're going to go back and forth with an examiner probably 3, maybe 4 or 5 times before you get to patentability. And that's important because every single time that you have to respond to an office action, it costs money to do that because you have to have somebody like me prepare the response and have the examiner understand exactly how the claims have been changed and what the scope of the innovation is currently. So you need to be prepared for that as the prosecution process. So that's talking about what happens once it gets to the patent office. But what about international patents? Do you have protection for outside the United States? Once again, patents are geographically oriented, but if you are seeking international patent protection, there is a vehicle called the Patent Cooperation Treaty. Now, the Patent Cooperation Treaty permits you to reserve the right to file for up to 30 months in all jurisdictions that are signatories to the Patent Cooperation Treaty. You must file, and this is very important, you must file prior to public disclosure to preserve your rights in Europe and other countries. But that has a little bit of a kink to it in the fact that if you have filed any sort of patent application within the United States, that permits you to utilize that as a priority document such that you have 12 months from the date of earliest priority in the United States to file for PCT protection in other jurisdictions. So you can preserve your rights in Europe and other countries up to 12 months after the filing in the United States, but you got to file in the US first. And a PCT filing is accepted it's actually by more than 151 countries. I just read recently that an additional 2 countries have been added to the list. But for 150 plus countries, you have reserved your right, meaning that you have filed basically an international provisional. And the PCT, again, lasts for up to 30 months. And then the PCT is filed in 2 phases. The first is an international search. And again, this is when you're actually filing the patent application itself. It's a little bit different than in the United States because if you have a US provisional, you don't need claims. when you file under the PCT, you have to provide them with a set of claims against which they can search. But this search is good in all signatory countries. And in some countries, this actually serves as their first step of examination. But the second phase, which you must do again before the term is up, is to file for entry into a national stage in those countries in which you wish to seek protection. And it's important to be careful about which countries you wish to file in the national stage, because every single country has their own fees for filing in the international stage. The PCT application in the first phase is one fee, but in the second phase, in national stage, you would have to file a national stage entry fee in every single country that you wish to, in which you wish to file. Also, there are translation costs and other sorts of costs that can be associated with each national stage filing. So you see, it can get pretty expensive pretty quickly. My recommendation to inventors when they wish to file internationally is, which countries do you believe that your patent would cover a product that you're going to put in that market? And then file for national stage protection only in those markets in which you think that you're going to have a significant presence. That way you can maximize your investment in national stage filings. So with that, we've gotten through, how do I know if something's patentable? How do I know if I've got something patentable? Building a patent portfolio, talking about searching, negotiation with examiners, what about, and how to perform or think about international filing. And if we do all of this properly, then we get to a successful result. So that's my presentation for today. I'm more than happy to take any questions at this point in time. And here's my contact information if you think of questions later on. So with that, Caroline, I'm going to turn it over to you to supply me with any questions that may have popped up.
Thanks so much, John. I do see one question about the event being recorded. Yes, this is being recorded and it will be posted on Riot's YouTube channel. I will also post the link on the meetup page. If anyone has any direct questions regarding the event and John's presentation, now would be the time. We'll give it a couple minutes to see if any questions pop up.
Sounds good. I always look forward to questions because many times it will bring up issues that we didn't have time necessarily to discuss in the presentation, but can be important to individual inventors. Just let me know.
All right, we have one coming in, John. At what stage patent filing should be considered, assuming I am in ideation phase?
Sure. Once you have a complete idea and can provide a description of what you would do in order to successfully create that product or process or whatever. Like if you're doing software, if you can get to the level of something where you can show the entire design and talk about every major step and a result, that's the point at which you should think about at least filing for a provisional, because a patent application is what they call a reduction to practice. What that means is you have to be able to describe to somebody of ordinary skill in the art what you did and how you did it at a sufficient level of detail that they can recreate what you did just from your description and any figures that you supply. So if you're at the point where you say, yeah, okay, it's not 100%, but I know I can do a minimum viable product already, then that's the point at which you should think about at least applying for a provisional.
Awesome. Thank you so much, John. Second question. For international patents, you mentioned optimizing your investments by selecting countries you plan to launch a product in. Is there any strategy for filing in countries where competitors may launch products even if you may not?
Yeah, the problem with that is that if they're going to launch products in areas in which in countries in which you don't intend to either market heavily or release a product, then I would recommend against filing in those countries, because if you're not going to sell into that market, you're not going to sell into that country, it is unlikely that you will receive a return on your investment for the filing fees and the prosecution fees that you're going to incur in every single country in their national stage process. Again, because patents are geographically oriented, you're not going to be able to defend a US patent in Thailand, for instance, or in Singapore. But if you have a Singapore patent and somebody releases their product in Singapore, then you can defend in Singapore. So the thing that you have to think about is it worth it in terms of time and effort for me to lock everybody out in Brunei or Ivory Coast or some country in which you may not have a market, or just let that company, have their product in that area and you just compete with them in that small country. That's why I always say you really want to think about which markets are your most important ones and protect yourself in your most important markets. In the other markets, again, unless you're going to get a return on investment, it's probably not worth it to go into markets in which you're not going to be doing much in terms of sales. That's really a business consideration more than a patent consideration, but it's true nonetheless.
Thanks so much, John. Another question. I am into mobile app development, and there are thousands of apps out there before me that may not have even been patented. Should I care for patents for every idea and every app I release?
So should you do what?
The question was phrased, should I care for patents for every idea and app I release? It might have been a typo. Should I create a patent?
Yeah, and that's where I was talking about earlier. Most mobile apps are what I consider short cycle patents. I mean, there are certainly examples of those that have a very strong market presence, such as the mobile app Waze, which was created 8 or 10 years ago. It was actually purchased by Google and put into Google Maps. But for most mobile apps, they're going to find all of their market potential within a year or two of release. And like I said, with those types of applications, the problem that you're going to run up against is the fact that it's going to take you 2 to 3 years to get through the examination process. So by the time that you get your patent, and you probably will get your patent, but chances are really good either the market's moved past it, or you have superseded it with a different product, or somebody's come out with a different mobile app that has your market overwhelmed by others adopting that one instead of yours. I mean, there are a lot of issues to think about, and that's why most mobile apps don't bother with patent protection, because they know that either it's a very specialized application that's only going to be suitable for a small group of individuals. And there's a perfect example of one of my clients. He created an application called RunP, and it's exactly what it sounds like. He created an application that provides you with open areas in movies in which you can get up and go take a bathroom break. So you can go run and pee during these areas because nothing much is happening. Now, it sounds crazy, but he's making quite a bit of money off that application, and he did for about 2 years. And then after 2 years, everybody who wanted it had it. And so it was superseded by other types of applications that came along. So it's really a consideration as to whether you think you're going to get a return on the investment for filing that application, and whether the mobile app is still going to be around 3 years from now. If you can answer those two questions in an affirmative, yeah, you'll get a return on your investment, and yeah, you're going to be around 3 years from now, then I would encourage you to file for patent protection. But if you're not, you're probably better off, or suited better off, to use the money that you would for getting a patent to better market your application so that you can reach the maximum return on your investment. And again, that's more a business consideration than patent consideration, but it's also true nonetheless.
Awesome. Thanks so much, John. I do not see any additional questions. So I just want to thank John so much for being here again today. And if you think of any questions, please do reach out to him at john@sotoip.com. Thank you. Oh, wait, we have one more. If you have time, John. If I sell my innovation that was patented, and then if I sell my company to someone, what will happen to my patent?
Sure, it all depends upon how you assigned the ownership rights to your patent. If you retained the ownership rights as the inventor, which you can do because inventorship rights and ownership rights are separable. If you have retained the ownership rights, then when you sell the patent, then all right and title is transferred from you to the new owner. However, if you've assigned all of your rights from yourself to the company, when you sell the patent rights, then the company is the one that receives the revenue, and the company is the one that has to sign off on whether the patent is transferable to another owner or not. So if you retain the rights as the inventor, you can sell your patent separately from your company. If you assign the rights to the company, then the patent becomes a corporate asset and then must be either licensed and or sold with the rights to the company.
Great. Thanks so much, John. I actually do have another question that just came in. Would you recommend starting the patent process before releasing an MVP for a software as a service?
Yes, I really would, at least for a provisional application. And here's why. Because if you decide, and the first thing is that in the United States, when you release your MVP, that starts your 12-month time clock in which to permit you to file for US patent protection. However, it destroys your rights in Europe because anytime you publicly disclose something before you have sought patent protection, then Europe says you've already given it freely to the public. So as a protective measure, I really recommend that before, even if it's just the day before you issue your minimum viable product, you should file for patent protection in the United States. And then that permits you not only to have the 12-month time clock in the United States before you have to convert to a non-provisional so that you can see how well it's doing in the marketplace, but it also retains your rights in any other country outside of the United States so that you can later file for patent protection in those other jurisdictions.
Very helpful. Thanks, John. We'll give it just another minute in case any last questions pop up.
Yeah, this is great. I really enjoy answering questions.
Great. Yeah, we do have one comment. These are excellent answers. Thank you so much for hosting the event. Great feedback.
And Caroline, you're always gracious, and thank you so much for being such a great host.
Absolutely. Happy to help. Always great to have you, John.
Thanks. Well, if there are no other questions, I'm going to go ahead and say so long for now. And like I said, I look forward to hearing from anybody who has additional questions. I'm not going to bill anybody for asking me a question or sending me an email. That's not the way that I work. So feel free to ask questions as they occur to you. All right.
Thanks so much, John. Thanks to everyone for being here today. Have a great weekend.
Yes, indeed. You too. Take care.
Take care.